And welcome back to ScavTalk, everyone. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing a just pushed out update from Escape from Tarkov. They tweaked Inertia. Followed by that, we're going to cover some other minor news topics. And then finally, we're going to have a kind of a generalized brainstorm session in regards to a clip posted by Landmark where BSG contacted him and asked him to provide some feedback for the video game known as Escape from Tarkov. So, Giga, how has your week been? How was the mini vacation?
It was good. Yeah, it was good. So, in some ways, this is almost like the perfect time to take this kind of break away, especially when we're thinking more cerebrally about the game that is Tarkov. But yeah, it was weird coming back after not having played for a bit, because usually I'm at least like thinking about the game, like running the hideout or whatever. Like, it's hard to escape from Tarkov. Not to, pun not intended, but if you're just like around, it's very tempting to go and use the hideout or whatever, do scav run, maximize, like if you're still playing and grinding or whatever, because it's just kind of like free. It's like free money, you just do it and it's easy. You don't have to play real PMC raids. But anyway, so I was away from basically like finished up making like batch videos because on Friday I had to have something out for Saturday, out for Monday, out for Wednesday, because I'm doing this new Monday video as well, which is kind of cool. That I'm enjoying, but yeah, I had to batch all that stuff out. So I was like working pretty hard up until Friday, and then I was kind of like off for the afternoon, spending a bit of time like with the fam here because I was going to be away, and then I had a super early flight. So what ended up happening was because of the coronation here, all the flights were just a mess. I couldn't get a flight that was cheaper than, because I got told at the last minute that I had a ticket for this thing, which was the Berlin Dota 2 major, by the way, for anyone who didn't sort of pop into the stream the other day. Because I'm a Dota fan, I do love going to these things, and my sis sometimes gets hooked up with cool tickets because she's part of the UK university esports scene. So sometimes I get to go with her to stuff. That's how I ended up going to Stockholm last time, because she got hooked up with some tickets for that. She's like also the luckiest person ever, which is crazy. Like, she got some tickets for Stockholm. She then managed to get to Singapore TI because she was can you believe this? Right, she was going to a friend's wedding in Australia that just so happens to sit across the TI weekend, and she had a transfer through Singapore. And she paid a £10 admin fee and dislocated the 2 legs of the journey by 4 days and went to TI. Like, how lucky is that? The timing, like, it's insane. And because, I can't remember if she had to buy a ticket or not. I'm not even sure, but it was just like the timing was just ridiculous, right? Because that was planned before it was even announced. Anyway, so there's tickets float appear for Berlin. I'm just like, okay, well, we may as well go. But I almost didn't, because I got told later the coronation stuff. Like, I couldn't get a flight out on the Friday for less than £250, and I was like, this is kind of a false economy, right? Like, I'm not sure if I don't think I would pay £350 to go. Like, tickets are free or no tickets, I was just like, well, this doesn't really make sense. So we spent ages figuring it out, and eventually I could go like really early on Saturday morning and come back really early on Tuesday. So like stagger the whole thing by a day and go at some stupid time in the morning. And I got a lift to Manchester at like 4 a.m. Stupid stuff like that. But I was going to miss the whole Friday anyway, so I went from like Saturday through to Tuesday morning. So I like missed both stream sessions on Monday and Tuesday. So the next time that I got to play Tarkov was on Thursday, because I was catching up on content and stuff on Wednesday. So played again on Thursday on the stream, and I was like, man, I'm going to be really out of practice. But it actually went quite well. It was good because it's been the first time in a long time that I was like away, like focusing on another game and like being somewhere else and like not really thinking about it. Like, I didn't really think about Tarkov very much, which is kind of cool. Like, kept like scroll through Twitter every now and then, but otherwise really chilled. So that was quite nice. And then it's been just quite a busy like touching grass kind of week. Like today we were like out in an aquarium all day with the family and stuff we had planned. So just like it's been good. And it's probably been the perfect time for all this stuff, just because the game's in kind of a funny place. We're at a bit of a kind of I don't know what you'd really call it. Like, it's like a critical point. We're like a fork in the road in some ways. I think there's like changes that come now.
Feels like that.
Yeah, there could be like big changes like now and over the next 6 months, and then after that things like might get set in stone. I don't really know. Like, it's hard to know exactly how that's going to work out, but it does feel like BSG are kind of asking for feedback and a bit more receptive, I think, to things that people are saying. Maybe we will see. I mean, that's the impression, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, it's been good. It's been all right. Also, I wasn't that rusty when I came back on Thursday either. It was quite a good time in the end. It was pleasing. I was like, I didn't lose too much of the old muscle memory, which is good. But yeah, before we delve into like all the stuff about like BSG and feedback and yada yada, because that's like a huge conversation, maybe even bigger than this one cast, and I've hinted about that before. There's been a couple of changes. All right, there's been a few changes over this week. Which one should we start with? The easy one?
Yeah, that's the easy one.
So I guess that's the old lab, the laboratory
Yeah.
cards.
Yeah.
The labs cards. Labs cards are back on the flea. I don't really know. Like, people ask me whether I thought this was a good change or not. I think overall it probably is a good change. I'm not sure if it's that impactful in general. I just don't think it matters that much.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. I really don't know. I mean, some people were saying like it's just a temporary thing. Like they kind of done this weird thing, which I'm not really a fan of. But they've like the lower the spawn rates at the start of the wipe for like all the bosses, and then like those like slowly increase them throughout the coming weeks of the patch. And to me it's just like, why? I mean, if you're gonna have that, if that's like the goal, then fine, just like bake it into the game. But like doing it manually just feels really like kind of scuffed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I guess,
Yeah.
I don't know. It just makes it very unclear what, because this has been like a trend for, I want to say at least 2 wipes, maybe 3, and it makes things uncertain for the player, like expectation wise, which I guess can be a good thing, but it's also, the point is with the labs cards is, are they doing this because it's in the wipe, or is this just like a final change for it's hard to like make informed opinions on how this affects the game, because it's just a kind of microcosm of like this period in the wipe. So in the end it really doesn't matter because the wipe's almost over. Like, I don't know, it's just a weird phenomenon in Tarkov.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It is interesting. It's like you'd almost rather them say, right, we're always good at, because the thing is, they don't even say about the wipe cycle, right? We're on 6 monthly wipes right now by history. BSG have never said that this is the case. That there's, it's maybe it's just by coincidence, like they set it like that, and it just so happens to have worked out. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right? But you'd prefer as a player really to have a bit more structure, right? If wipes are going to continue in the game as we know it, which is what they've said, because there's going to be the wipe character and the non-wipe character in the future, and as with all of these things that have ladder and non-ladder accounts, the wipe account is going to be the one that streamers and content creators focus on, because that's where the race is, etc. So that's going to be like the more important account, quote unquote, and it'll be a bit closer to what we play right now. You'd almost rather say, right, here's the 6 months of the wipe, and the boss spawns will start off as 1%, and then 5, 10, 20, whatever, like throughout is on each month.
Right.
And even then you can stage stuff like other ideas that people have had about locking certain things on the fleet depending on the time, or unlocking stuff from traders, or whatever, right? You could do things like that then too, to people kind of then know what's coming. Whether that's good or not, I'm not sure, but I feel like that maybe isn't their plan. But yeah, they have done this a couple of times, and it does make it a bit strange, because even in the past we've had things like the wipe where we had level 20 flea and they changed it down to 15, and people were like, is this just because it's like later, like are they going to put it back to 20 when we get into the next wipe? But then they kept it at 15, they didn't touch it. So it's tricky to know exactly what's coming in the next wipe. But like, in some ways I don't mind, it's kind of okay, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of with you. It's like a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, because my issue is like, it's hard to provide feedback when I don't know what the expectation is set for me. You know what I mean? It's like they're constantly tweaking the numbers, but our belief is they're tweaking it based off the wipe progression. Like, they don't want people progressing too fast, so they lower the spawn rates. And then as people start complaining more and more, like, I can't kill Rashala, do my task, then they bump it. You know what I mean? It's just like this weird, like, I'd rather just be baked in the game, so then I can provide feedback on the expectation set for me as a player for the experience. Right now, it's just like a vague cloud that I have to deal with.
And that's right. That's like, it's the same thing we've talked about before about like is it a beta, is it not a beta? Like, in some ways yes, in some ways no, in some ways we can test stuff, in some ways we're not told enough, so we can't. It's another one of those elements where, do they want feedback or not? Do they want specific feedback based on things that we're told? Or do they want feedback based upon the fact that we don't know things, and they're testing our response to things that we don't know as a player base when they make changes? Like, there's there's that argument too, but it's as from a player's perspective, it is a bit confused sometimes. So I don't know, but I mean, yeah, this doesn't really matter that much. I guess the important thing is if you do want to go to labs, it is now much easier to go. It is about the same price as therapists. You can just buy the cards because tons of people don't want to play labs. The combination of they don't know the map, they're scared to go. There's no insurance and they don't like it, and they're worried about cheaters, whatever. So they just sell the cards because they're good value and they're 160 whatever K. And unless you're looking for the MCC, the GPSA, maybe a LEDX and some high tiers, items that spawn on labs as well as other maps, to be fair, but or maybe killing rogues for XP. A lot of people think, well, why even bother, right? Even if they could go to labs, they just think, well, I could just play streets. So I'll sell the card and get 160K, and then I could use that to fund my loadouts on Streets of Tarkov instead and make just as much money, so with less risk. So I do understand that. So I mean, you can see the prices of cards, but I presume it probably will continue. That they're going to be lower than therapists' trader price. Also, as the wipe goes on too, like people have like higher scav karma, which you do seem to tend to get more labs cards as your scav karma goes up.
Oh, okay.
Mine, I really did chill on that for a while, and now my scav karma is over 4 because I ended up taking. I'm not really a big car extract guy. I don't know why. I'm just not. And I ended up taking like a load of car extracts on interchange, a bunch on like a few other places. I think like where else did I take them? Like Woods maybe, and a bit on customs, and ended up with like over 4. And now I get labs cards all the time. And I quite like keeping them because they're useful for dailies. I often get that like handing 3 labs cards for a daily, and I'm just like, boop, there you go. But now people will be incentivized to sell them. It's beforehand if you weren't going, it's kind of like people just probably stored them up. Maybe it's temporary that they'll be cheap. I don't know, because like loads of people probably have a ton of them because it feels bad to sell the labs cards if you can't buy them back easily, and they don't take up much space. And if you just have to sell them to therapists, I can't actually remember what the therapist sale price is.
I think it's like 680. Or sorry,
like 60K,
68K. Yeah, I think I don't know why that number's in my head, but it is
60. Oh, apparently 63 now.
okay.
Yeah, close, pretty close. Yeah, so 63K, but you think like, oh man, it's like 166K to buy them, and you can only buy. Well, you could only buy 1 per reset, right?
Yeah,
and now it's 2, and now you can buy them off the fleet. So maybe people had them stored up. Like we'll see where it settles out now that they're back on the fleet. It could end up being slightly higher than I wouldn't be surprised if they're just like 170 on the fleet eventually. Once the glut of storage of people going like, oh, you can sell these now. Oh, let's put them up on the market. Once that feeds through, then you're just looking at like the current supply of labs cards versus people buying them. I feel that might end up being just around the trader price, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, other than just being annoying, going like, oh, I want to play. Like I ran into this a few times. Like I was trying to play labs for the MCC GPSAs, and I could only buy 1 per reset. And like I just kept forgetting because like I've got better things to be doing in my life than just like setting timers for the bloody therapist reset. You know what I mean? And so I'd forget, and I'd get like, I'd stream on Monday and I'd use like 4 out of 5 cards, and then I'd have 1 card left, and then I'd forget a few times, and I'd buy 3, and then I'd do the stream, and I'd buy 1 when I get on, and I have like 4 now, and then I do 4 raids, and I can buy 1 more, and then I do 1 more raid, and then I'm just like, well, I'm out, guys. Like, we've done 2 hours of labs, and now I'm out. I've got another hour and a half to go on my stream, and I'm out. So it's just like, that is just annoying.
And then the question is like, is it even worth, doing that? Like in your case, yes, because that's like the only reason you have to go there primarily is for your quest.
Yeah.
Right. So, because circling back to the beginning, how we started this, like if this stays for next wipe, there's implications to that. So like, I would imagine like this is I'm going to different. I'm going to go all over the place here. So like,
that's okay.
I was thinking, so I got this other side project, and it's like an actual Tarkov content piece, and it's coming up with some ideas, was brainstorming with some other people, and it was like, well, what if at the start of wipe, we tried to like get to labs as fast as possible and get like super geared up, and it's like, well, they've nerfed a lot of the raiders, like we could get some gear, but then like what are we gonna do after that? And then it's like, well, a lot of the good stuff is probably locked behind the keycard rooms, and those are like 1%, less than 1% drops. And then like, how do you even get a keycard at the start of wipe? Like, and I didn't know about scavs, but that that's a lot of grinding. Even if you're just like trying to kill bosses, like that's still a lot of grinding. Like it's a lot of grindy stuff to do that. And then the question is like, is it even worth it to do it, you know, in the first place? And like, is all this just these restrictions are based around like cheating in RMT? Is that like the case? You know, I can't say one way or the other, but nonetheless, and in some ways I feel like if the most reliable way to get key cards consistently is to play Scav, then I almost feel like it's probably good that you can't sell those on the flea market. It's just like, you know, Scav is just kind of like, it's not free money, but it's just zero risk. You pay an opportunity cost, sure, but you're just given if you're a good Scav, you're just kind of given like good loot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I do those like I mean, it is depending on what you do, right? Like, as I don't play that much Scav now because I want to play more PMC, and I just do the run through factory.
Mm-hmm.
You just roll inventories. That's it. You just roll for inventories. It takes so little time, right? Like scavving into the factory takes no time to queue, much less time to queue than PMC. When you like the worst case is that you spawn in and it's 14 minutes. And you have to wait 1 minute before you can leave for it to be fine and raid. But that's like the worst case. It's like it's so quick to do. You can go and loot a box, right? And then it's time to leave. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the access. So it's like Therapist 4,
right?
Which is Mechanic 3 barter, which is expensive.
Yeah.
Or Mechanic 4 barter, which is actually even more expensive. But yeah. PSG balance, KEKW. So it's like, yeah, how are you going to get them, right? And it's like, yeah, they're on pretty much on. It is pretty much on Scav only. Like, it is kind of weird, right? It's really the only way to get them routinely. It's where I get most of my Finding Raid ones. It's just from spamming Scav through factory whenever I have a piece of downtime, which is bizarre. And once you get over about 4 Scav karma and you have all of the stuff like Intel Center and whatever, like your Scav timer is really low. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it is, but like even now, like I'm not even 6 fence rep or whatever, and it's like 6 minutes or something. It's like absurd. Like by the time that you've even if you've run through factory, like by the time you've like sorted the kit out, like normally I just try and sell it all to traders now so I don't waste too much time. But if you actually go through and like maximize it and sell everything on the flea, by the time you've done it, like the Scav's back off cooldown. And you can basically just run Scav infinitely if you really want to through factory and just make like tons of money, because each time you roll in, you just got random stuff. Like the last one, I had one of those like MGT thingies that you can sell to therapists, or you get like an ETG stim or like whatever. Right. Like it's also the best way to complete samples, the quest, because you get random stims on your Scav too. It's like it's wild what you get on Scav, but there's not really any other good way of doing it, because I think that they nerfed the amount that they spawn on bosses a lot. I mean, I remember people talking about that. Like, yeah, I don't kill enough bosses to know precisely, but I feel like I haven't got a labs card off a boss for a while. But whereas it used to feel like almost every other time that you kill the boss, you got a labs card. Like, why did they get rid of that? Like, bosses are hard enough as it is. Like, you couldn't sell the labs cards on the fleet before. I mean, like maybe now, like, but again, it's just like an extra piece of loot. You know, you get 160k for killing the boss. Okay, that's fine. Like, what's the big deal?
It's just, I don't know. It feels like going through this process and thinking about this idea that I was referring to. It just feels like the philosophy is very long grinds that they want people to experience, you know, and that's so, you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I would think anyways, but it just makes what we were trying to do just challenging, because you it's very hard to like, you basically just have to go through all the hoops, you know, and that's the game, you know. There's just kind of there's not like a big crazy thing to do early in the way,
like a shortcut or something.
Yeah, but something that's like insane, like, you know, like for example, in DayZ, you could run to military base, but you'd have to like, you're investing so much time to run all the way there. And then, like, are you even guaranteed to find something? Like, all the zombies, someone else might also be doing a thing. If you die, you just wasted, like, an hour. You know what I mean? There's not, like, whereas Tarkov is just kind of like, you'll get there eventually. And then, like, you die, but it's not, like, a big deal. You know, it sucks. But, you know, it's a very slow crawl to the top, you know.
It's so structured. That's the thing. It is actually so structured, Tarkov, right? It's like, as we say now, it's like, level 4 therapist for guaranteed, level 3 mechanic for the bosses. Like,
right.
That's it. That's really it. But then like stuff happens in weird ways. It's like the drop rate of this thing is like, yeah, it's on Scav for some reason, but like no jackets and like hardly anything on bosses. Like we need a bit of a, these things need to be rebalanced a little bit to be like the way that it seems to me. It's not even that no one should be going to labs early. It's almost more that I would rather the spawn rates be more interesting and be on bosses and stuff like that,
Right.
and then not be on the flea. That would be fine because it's like, oh, I killed Vishala or whatever. Well, I'm going to go find Vishala to go and get a labs card because they're like, this coveted thing, and I can go early if I kill him. Like you have to go and do the thing to then get the item to then go to labs to then get the cool stuff.
Right. That's
Or
like,
you can grind up the traders. Like it gives you alternatives. Whereas now it's just kind of like, oh, I just got to quest more. Like for everything, it's the only
that's how it
answer. Like most of the
feels,
time, yeah.
I mean, in theory, yeah. I mean, I guess you could always get lucky still, but because the luck is so high, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah, it's just not consistent and not fun to try and like you can't try. This is a big point of something that I've been thinking about with a lot of this stuff. It's like you just with a lot of the high tier items. Like I've got bits about this in my like thing that I've been writing, but say like I don't really know how this will translate properly, but like say like Diablo 2, because I always refer back to Diablo 2. Like there were certain bosses that dropped certain things, and there were certain bosses that dropped certain runes and stuff like that, and they were like important because you needed to combine them together to do get higher tier runes. You could combine like 3 runes. But, like they had like Diablo 2 had this like ridiculous system for gems and also runes as well, where they're all tiered, and 3 of the lower tier makes 1 of the higher tier, which means you need like if you have like all the lower grade gems or runes, it takes like an inordinate amount to get to the higher tier stuff, right? But if you get like some in sort of the mid to high tier, you could combine them together in a sort of legitimate way to get something better. And there were certain bosses that would drop some of these like decent runes, so you could eventually grind your way up to the top in theory.
So you kind of have like 2 paths in a sense.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, you might get the drop itself, but there was also ways to combine them together. If you did grind it over and over, eventually you would get there probably, because you had enough of the lower runes to like make it. But you would actually like have the ability to go and try to do the precise thing that you want to do. Like, oh, it's not like you're in the right ballpark. Let's put it that way, right? You want to grind for runes. Okay, we're going to kill this particular boss. You want to grind for like items for this particular thing. Like, okay, well, this is a different boss you have to go and kill. Whereas like Tarkov right now, it feels a bit like, okay, what are the like super coveted items? Okay, it's like the ult in the Reese T. Maybe the Juk 6, the armor. You've got like the 7N40 bullet. How do you get those things? Freaking like just run stashes, is it? Anywhere, any stash, anywhere, and the chance of getting one is minuscule. Or run the scav case for like a minuscule chance. Like you can't do anything. You have no player agency to try and increase the odds of doing this stuff, right? Yeah. And it's not like I want guaranteed spawns for items.
Yeah.
It's like it's a little bit like the labs thing. It's like, okay, you want MCC GPSA, you have to go to labs and hit these spawns. They're not always there. They're pooled with other items. Same with Vertex. I've been running Vertexes and COFDM radio things on Lighthouse too. It's like, okay, I have to go to these certain places to go and get them, but they're not that often spawning the actual item in that particular place. So I have to go to here, to here, to here, to here, to here, to here, Merin Boot, the Hillside House, into chalets, these separate spots, this spot here, this spot here. Maybe I could go to reserve instead. Like I feel like I have some player agency there. Whereas there's a lot of items that you just don't have any agency. It's just like, this thing's just rare TM.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do about that? Absolutely nothing. And that just feels crappy.
Well,
it's like,
I would say what you can do about it is you grind the quest. Well, I guess in the case, because they've restricted a lot of these things, that's not really the case now. But previously, you would just grind the quest while also hitting the caches. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's not like this. Like the Diablo example, it sounded like you could collect. It's like a collectathon. You could collect a few pieces here and there. Sort of like passively, and then fill in the gaps with actively seeking out some of these collectathon items. So you sort of have like you're going to get there eventually if you get unlucky or if you fail a certain collectathon. Like it would be insane, but like there's still like a viable path there, and there's a viable path for like actively seeking out each of the things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole extra layer on the Diablo thing because it's like you could also it's all actually almost a little bit like the old flea market barter thing for the really high. You had that like upper echelon of items, like all the marked keys and all the colored key cards and Hillside House Merrin when they were good, plus the
Mhm.
streets. That's the special room on streets. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but the all of those ones where were only barters, and you needed any item from this grouping, but they were all really, really rare. It was almost a little bit like that as well as another overlay on D2s. It's like, oh, if you want this specific rune that's like really, really high level, you could trade it for something with somebody, but you had to have something that was also really good, right? You can't just throw like tons of junk at them and then expect them to accept it. But it's more complicated in something like D2 because you might have a really rare item for paladin, but you play like mage,
Right.
and it's useless to you, but it's invaluable to someone else.
Yeah.
So you kind of then go, okay, well then they've got a rune that's like, then you can combine with, like, you've got 3 out of the 4 runes that you need to make use of. It was like a super cool system. I love D2's system. They had this thing called rune words, basically. So you have like, I mean, you've never played the Diablo game, right?
Missed out.
So like the super basics of it was that certain pieces of armor had, they were called socketed, and they basically had slots in them.
Okay.
Right, so you had like 1 to 6 slots. I think maybe even up to 8. I can't remember. Maybe it was up to 8 in the expansion. It's been a long time since I played. But anyway, so you could just put gems in there. So you put like a bunch of like red gems in a sword and you get fire damage. You put a bunch of red gems in the shield and you get fire resist, right? It's like that kind of system. But then in the expansion, they added these runes as well, which is cool. And so different runes did different things, and they were a bit more versatile than just the gems. You didn't just people just used to get like up to perfect gems and then just like fill them with like perfect diamonds to get like all the resistances across like the rainbow of elements. But with the runes, it was a bit different. Like they were good, but not like on their own. They were like all right, but there were these things called rune words. And if you combined a certain set of runes together, it would do like a special thing.
Oh, I see. That's cool.
Which is really sweet.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. So depending on like what build you were doing and precisely what character class you were, certain rune words worked better or worse. And some of them were just like absolutely like off the chain nuts, which is why they were so cool. It'd be like you could play Paladin and get a rune word that basically gave you the sorceress's teleport in one of your shields or on your armor, I think it was, which is just like completely mental. And some of them would just give you like crazy mana regen. So they allowed you to access like ridiculous end game states that just are not possible otherwise, which is super fun because you basically just run around feeling like completely OP most of the time. And then there's like extra hard levels and stuff that make it, balanced and stuff. And everyone's got access to these things. So PvP is not crazy as long as it's balanced well. Anyway, so like it's a bit more nuanced than in EFT because Tarkov's like more difficult than that because it's not like a traditional RPG. You play as, it's not like a fantasy RPG, so you don't play as some kind of immortal character of like fighting off hordes of, underlings. Plus, it's not a traditional RPG either in the fact that it's a looter shooter extraction game instead, where like these individual like any individual item, the value of those items is degraded just on the basis that like when you die it's gone. There's like a lot of these RPGs are great because you can grind for a month to find this thing and then you're like, now I feel like super powerful because I put it in my armor and I've finally completed my whatever it is that you've been looking for, and now you're just some kind of like almighty god. And when you die, you don't lose that thing. It's like it's just different. It's just different. So like that's another thing that Tarkov always has an issue with, is that like no item is that great, except actually for things that like permanently upgrade your account. Exactly. Which was why back in the day, I mean, I'm sort of veering wildly off track here because we're still technically in the updates to the game section because we've already veered off. We'll try and bring it back. But things like Mark Dreams having like weapons cases and stuff, because the cases are permanent upgrades to your account, right?
Those were such good days.
And those were the sick moments. Like I was thinking back to the really like cool like high end Octane stuff that you could do. Like now it's just like running around getting 1 million kills, whereas like it's like Veritas's video from like 3 years ago taking in like a thick items case into labs, and stuff like that, right? You can't do that now, and it's like
taking in scav junk boxes to interchange.
Yeah.
I love
kind of
that, dude. Because
it's huge risk.
Yes.
For huge reward.
Yes.
And you could keep upping the ante to like ridiculous proportions.
Yes.
Then, but you just can't do that now, and it's like it's taken the top off the game.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, right? It's like seeing somebody die with a thick case is a huge loss, and it's like, it makes you feel something.
It's
a
net exchange and joy. The other person you're suffering is someone else's joy.
Exactly. And then it's just like, even people just like parking a thick items case somewhere random on the map and just going back and forth to it, just like filling it up with stuff next to the elevator, and then like hit the button and just like crawl out the last final like 3 feet. It's just like, it's just different.
Yeah.
It was just different. So anyway.
And that's tying it back to labs. That is how I conceptually see labs. I don't know how BSG see it, but that's kind of how I would see it. Is it's this restricted area. It's like highly guarded, highly secured. There's a lot of valuables in there, and it's not necessarily easy to get access to, and it's expensive. Like I guess we'll just stick with it's not easy to get access to, right? So that makes it valuable. It makes the key card valuable. But like the way they have it set up is like it's not really all that valuable. Like you need like the Thanos key cards to really get the full value of it. You need every color, dude. You really do. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not. They've changed it now. I think there's a couple rooms where you can loot valuables that are not locked. But I mean, I don't know. I can't say for certain, what the value is, how much you're going to get a return on your investment. But nonetheless, conceptually, I like the idea. Whereas now it's like, okay, you want to do this thing, do this entire quest line and reach this specific level and unlock this barter. Now you can do it. And oh yeah, by the way, it's not really that great because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree. I agree. So it's just a weirdness thing with the tweaks and things. I think one issue that Labs has is that it became like the de facto arena for the chads because of the way that it was set up. And it was not like really intended like that way by BSG. It's just everything was just free to, like at one point it was free to access. There weren't even cards. And that's where most people cut their teeth and learned how to become a Labs main. It was where people just did the stuff because there was no insurance, and that was the downside. And then there was the cards, and now people didn't want to go. So it kind of kept a lot of the community out there, especially if you started later. Like all these guys like learned to play when it was free to go. Took this huge advantage of just playing there all the time. And then they've slowly been putting the walls up around it, which is kind of the way it sort of should be in the story. But like because Tarkov never had any story, like the game that people were playing was the one without story, and that's what they liked. And like that's kind of half of the problem, I think, that PSG's got, is that they're changing the game that people came to know and love. Maybe, I don't know, it's tricky. It's just really tricky now, like exactly how to do it. I mean, they have forced people away with the changes that they made before. They're making it so you can only buy like one card at a time and stuff. Like people were playing different maps. But that's been going on for a while now. So like whether people will go back to Labs, I'm not sure. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, yeah, when I played it, like the loot seemed okay. Like it seemed pretty good. So you can get decent stuff there. But I don't think you're not pulling, 2 mil consistently or whatever, unless you go around and loot absolutely everything. But yeah,
are you making a return on your, like, are you breaking even at least?
Yeah, I mean, like, you still find the MCC items and stuff every now and then. Like an MCC is like 170k or something. It's 4 slots, but like 2x2. But it's a lot of money. And like you go in, there's like Golden Rooster and the parking like bit all the time, like VPXs. Like I found Aledics there, but there's like gold chains and stuff on the so there's like 2 open safes in the offices like that. I mean, there's a lot of loot around broadly. You'll find enough stuff to certainly break even. It's tricky though, because when you die, obviously you lose everything and there's no insurance.
Sure.
So.
But like in your case, it's kind of a win if you're breaking even because you're only there to find a very singular specific item to complete a quest. Right?
That's true, but I do think I was making money as well while showing, especially when I wasn't dying. Like when I didn't die like 5 times in a row, because sometimes that did happen.
Right.
But like broadly speaking, after a while of playing, I was probably dying like every other raid. I would say it was like 50%, 45% survival rate, something like that. And the raids that you did win on, you did, and if you tried, because I was going to lots of loot spots, which again is kind of unusual for me, but I was going to lots of these loot spots, so it did then end up feeling quite profitable once you added it all up, because you're picking the items that are good, and a lot of them are actually like really quite good, as opposed to just being like 10k, like I'm picking up 10 sets of wires or whatever. It's like as I said, I got you got a Golden Rooster in there, and you've got like a VPX in your secure container, and like
that's pretty good value.
It was okay. It was all right. So maybe it's not the way it used to be, but coming from somebody who is fresh-ish to the loot run or whatever, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Because people complain about interchange and stuff as well, and it's like, yeah, maybe the loot rooms are not that good, but I've been playing interchange a lot recently, and you just wander around, grab stuff, and just make freaking loads of money.
They can make. Yeah, it used to be a lot. I mean, the graphics cards and tech, like back in the day, it was busted. Yeah. It was absolutely busted.
I'm sure, yeah. And so people compare it to that. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing, especially given secure containers. But anyways,
Anyway,
a whole nother topic.
so
Next
that's
one.
the labs cards.
Nailed that one.
Gosh. So so the other one is Inertia. So they've changed Inertia. Now this one's a little bit confusing. So BSG basically have said, so they've come out and done balancing changes like they have been doing recently, actually telling us what they've done, which is cool. New balancing changes reduce the effect of the strength skill on the walking speed. I didn't actually know strength affected your walking speed, but there you go. You learn it here first, along with me. Significantly reduce the effect of the strength skill on inertia, is what BSG have said. Now, Logical, our main man Logical, has come out with some numbers. I really don't know what it means at all. So this is really not the most useful thing. But he just said, BSG have announced a change. Here are the values. Walking speed was reduced by 16.63%. Inertia stat was reduced by 75%. But he was just like, for those wondering, I'm honestly not really sure what this means. I'm waiting for the data team to have a look at it. But there was an update, I believe, from one of the guys at BSG. And they said it's more of a change for those who didn't reach elite strength yet. PMCs at lower levels of strength will have a little bit faster walking speed. PMCs at lower levels of strength will be less affected by inertia, basically equalizing the effects between high and low levels of strength. So it's just closing the gap, it seems.
Yeah. Which I guess they're not technically walking faster, but relative to the people at the high levels, they're walking faster than they were before.
Yeah, so it sounds like if you're level 1 strength, it sounds like you probably will be quicker. But if you're at max strength, then you will now be slower, is what it sounds like. So it's to decrease the range. So if you're in the middle, it's probably the same. You probably don't really notice.
Quicker than before?
I think so. It says here like PMCs at lower levels of strength will have a little bit faster walking speed.
I guess it's possible.
Specifically.
I don't know how the systems work, so I can't say one way.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be that much. I've never noticed the walk speed change, honestly. Like, you notice it when you're running, but it's not that big a deal, is it?
What do you mean walk speed change?
That would like the fact that the walk speed is now different. I mean, I've never noticed that my walk speed change. I mean, it's one of those things. The walk speed is slow. The percentage change to increase in walk speed is going to be small relatively. And throughout a whole wipe, like I don't normally get to max anyway. So me going over 4 months, going up 30 levels of strength, I've never noticed the walk speed changing. And you normally notice it when you're running.
I mean, I feel like I notice it. I mean, I don't know. I haven't gotten the few times I've gotten to max strength. I could instantly tell when I ticked over to max strength because you're just like you just walk so much faster. Like it's
even
such
walking.
Yeah, dude. It's like it's such a. I mean, back then it was more busted. Maybe now it's not so much, but like when you used to, because your weight would not only would you would get a percentage increase in like your movement speed, but your weight would decrease. So you would get that even. You would just get a massive. And yeah, I mean, it's. I was actually just watching a Landmark video recently, and he was like on the factory of a Glock 618C, and it's like his moves is like it's just crazy the way he strafes around corners. It's like it's not that he doesn't have inertia; it's just that he moves faster than like if you're on level 1. Like it's so different because again, the skill leveling in the game is like 1 through 10 is kind of linear, or not linear. It's exponential, meaning that it's easier to level up once you hit at the early levels. Once you hit 10 and past that, it's just it's the same requirement. It's like 100 skill points or whatever.
Yeah, the skill leveling. Yeah, indeed.
So it's like in that 10 to like 20 range where like probably a lot of the average people sit in like the middle of the wipe. It's like it's better than level 1, but it's not really that big deal. Whereas like if you're level 50, 51%, like it's such a big difference. Anyways,
that's the thing. I've never had max strength, so I just haven't felt it. But
I thought you have. Huh.
No, the only time that I ever got it was I didn't really counter it. It was in like the end of wipe events. I don't even know if I got strength. I might have just got endurance. I can't remember.
Okay.
And they like increased skill leveling by like 50x or something.
Oh, that's
stupid.
right. Yeah.
And you had like And you had the stupid. You could drink a condensed milk and just have like infinite stamina. That kind of like it was only in that period that I've ever had, and I can't even remember which one it was. But I've never had it normally. But like Axel retweeted it and said, one, PMC feels more clunky. Fair enough. I mean, he's presumably max strength. Two, feels a bit more like your PMC is drunk. I mean, when it's a step change, I guess that's right. Three, close range fights feel slower in a better way, as no one is zooming, which is interesting. And he said, I think many casuals will like that. Personally, I don't like the fact that the game is slowing further, as well as the lowered skill ceiling. Fair enough. That sounds like a pretty honest appraisal.
My skill ceiling, the classic.
No, yeah, the lower that you make the player movement speed, and the harder the effective endurance of inertia that you add, the skill ceiling does get lower. This is true. It's just true. When they added inertia, the skill ceiling got lower. It's true. Whether then it's good or not for the game, I don't know. But I've always stood by that fact. I'm pretty sure because it's a different set of skills, but it's not like pure. It's more like it becomes more positioning and more tactical, and also campy. Right, that's the other kind of the dark edge to that sort of angle versus run around hyper super octane. We're playing Apex Legends within the EFTE engine.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that your mechanical skill changes. Like, it's not solely, like in the case you're, Apex Legends, we talked about many times. There's a lot of like tracking involved. A lot of mouse movement. Counter-Strike, there is some tracking, but there's a lot of like emphasis on counter strafing, positioning, like a lot of there's a lot of keyboard focus. Like aim is still extremely important in Counter-Strike, and there's pre-aiming and crosshair placement, all that stuff's still hyper important, but without that like inertia mechanic, there's just a huge emphasis on your keyboard side of the things, which I think it applies to Tarkov a bit, but because it's janky, it's maybe a little less so, but
I would almost argue that CS is definitely more Tarkov-like, because it's like CS is like, aim is important, but it's a different kind of aim. Like Apex is like tracking aim, as you're saying, because it's like people have like loads of HP. Whereas like in CS, people don't actually have that much HP.
Right.
And if you're using the AK, they die in a single shot to the head. So, it's about like that. Then it's about, crosshair placement and positioning. And like looking through, you got like the one wall and the other wall, and you're like, and somebody crosses, bang, it's like, it's different. It's closer to Tarkov, I would argue, than Apex. Yeah. So it's tricky. It's tricky. I don't know. It's different. But anyway, I can see the argument for the skill ceiling being lowered. It's like, is it harder to differentiate between two high tier players of similar but not quite the same skill with inertia being higher? I think yes. It's hard to justify. Like completely and prove it, but I feel the answer is yes. I don't know.
That's maybe. I don't know either.
Hard to know. So anyway, that's kind of like a few people's thoughts on this topic. I mean, I don't really know. I played a Scav raid or two on Factory just to test it, because I was testing out something else as well, which I guess I may as well mention now. Desmond Pilaki was talking about how there is potentially a new like micro bug with this new inertia change. Now, I don't know whether it's because of the inertia change itself or something else or whatever, but it seems now, so the old system used to be, if you're walking forwards and you press shift, you start to run. If you hold shift and then you press W to walk forwards, you don't run, you just walk, because it ignores shift, because that happened before. If you're stationary and you press shift and then W, there's a very small window in which, if those two keys are too close together, even if you press shift first, you won't run. Which, it's quite niche. You have to be stood still and you have to tap the two keys really quickly. Something that doesn't really happen to me that often, but I guess, a top tier player would notice something like that, and he's noticed it and said this has only just appeared. Very obvious to him that it's only just appeared. I tested it alongside these other things. The inertia stuff didn't seem any different to me playing my Scav. I can't even remember what level my Scav is on strength and stuff. It's probably about 10 or 15, something like that, I would guess. Maybe even less, because you have hardly ever overweight on Scav, so it might even be like 8 or 7 or something. But the like being stationary and then going to run thing does actually, it is a thing. I think using the usual timing that I tend to use, my usual pattern on the keyboard, it probably doesn't happen. But you can make it happen if you're trying to be really precise about your Shift and W, the most important of keys. If you're a precision Shift W player, you will feel it, and it may happen sometimes then that you don't run when you think you would, because you would have before, because you definitely do press Shift. It's like it's very small. We're talking like a frame or two, but like even if you do it quickly, it works normally. But if you do it like really quickly, then it stops working, which is weird. And yeah, he says apparently this wasn't the thing before, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really odd. I mean, I feel like I have to like play and test it out to kind of understand what it feels like. I mean, it's just also kind of weird that this cropped up because they changed like 2 values that we know of at least, which makes me wonder if like I don't know. The sprinting in Tarkov is really weird to begin with. Like it's because I think by default you're supposed to hold the shift key, but if you hold it if you hold it prior to walking forward, then you will sprint. But if you're walking forward and then try to hold it, you won't sprint. It's really weird. I mean, in my opinion, you have to change it to a different where it's like toggle sprint. Like you instead of holding it, you toggle it. It makes it, in my opinion, makes it better. But or maybe it's, I don't know. Whatever. I haven't played Tarkov in a minute, to be honest. I can't precisely describe the.
I think for most people it won't matter, just simply because normally you're walking, like very rarely you stood still, and then moving into a sprint. I guess it's because of the way, like I've watched Desmond play a bit, and it's kind of the way that he plays, where he's like really, really, really aggressive, and then he'll like suddenly hold an angle, and then he'll push like crazy, right? So it like depends on what he hears, what he sees, what the players do, and he's like he switches very quickly between being completely stationary and being like super aggressive and moving all over the place. So that maybe that's because of his like playstyle and the way that he plays the game, more so that he notices it more than like somebody like me would. Because like I'm almost always walking usually, or I'm like completely still, and I'm like very. I guess like my timing's probably just not tight enough to run into a sprint that quick. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think most people won't notice. But now that I've told you all, now you won't be able to unsee it. One of those beautiful things. You've been blissfully ignorant before, and now that you've been told, now you won't be able to get it out of your head. So you can thank me for that. Yep. So that is basically. I think is that all the changes. I think that's everything.
It's all the changes.
And stuff that's been happening. Not too much. So I guess we're going to move into basically what we're going to spend the rest of the cast talking about, because it touches on every element of the game.
Whoa.
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry, there was a clip. Back to my YouTuber voice.
This changes everything. There was a clip that got circulated on Twitter and I guess other places, which was on Landmark Stream, and he basically said BSG had reached out to him to compile, or give him the opportunity to compile a list of feedback or things that are busted, why people are not liking the game, or what we think is broken, etc., etc., etc. And he basically said, I don't really know exactly how to approach this. Asking Twitch chat seems like a mistake, which is probably right. And he's like, I don't know really the best way to do this to get quality feedback without it just being completely overwhelmed by just crap feedback, basically. And he was like, probably the best way is to go out to a bunch of other creators. So he just talked about it in general. And like, I've seen a few people talking about some ideas, but I think this has sparked a lot of discussion and conversation. Like a lot of people dipping in with their different ideas of stuff. And I just like, it's hard to know exactly where to start. I mean, I was talking a couple of episodes ago about putting together some kind of like master document of all the problems about the way that the game is structured to try and figure it out and like crowdsource it kind of thing. And I've actually started to do that now, kind of because of this. I feel like it's, I was starting to think about making a video about this thing and about stuff that I think is broken, sort of in the same vein as like the alien tech video, that kind of format. Maybe not so much like, where is me in the whole world. No, the one, yeah, the one about the muzzle brake that they deleted.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was thinking the gaming company.
No. No, so less of a like rant, but more of a kind of like, here's the topics, and try and break it down in a sensible way. Which, and that's the thing. Like, if I'm thinking about a topic in a video style format,
right?
then I will usually then like break it down better in my own head, because I'm like compiling. Okay, well, it has to be much more structured and logical and like thought through. But like now that I've started reading out some of these things, it started to become pretty crazy. I mean, there was a load of feedback from Tig on Twitter with kind of his list, which I thought was interesting. Like, and it's useful to read what other people have said. Like, this is the thing: we need to all come together to figure it out. And there are going to be some points to this conversation that are going to be down to personal preference, and that is honestly unavoidable.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, maybe I just go through my list. I don't know. So, oh God, it's just like it's so there's so much. I'm not even sure where to begin. Genuinely,
let's read because Tig's got a response, and then I think there was someone else you wanted to bring. Maybe not. No, just
someone else.
No, let's do Tig's response as a starter.
So he said, saw that you reached out to Landmark Battle State in regards to things that are hurting the game. Without a doubt, here are the biggest issues that you'll ever need to fix. Loot balancing across all the maps. Massive issues across most maps. Now, he doesn't elaborate here in particular.
Right. There's some elaboration required there.
Yes, there's some elaboration required. I've heard him talking about this before. I mean, yeah, different maps have different amounts of loot, and different areas on different maps also have quite significantly different amounts of loot. I think mostly what he's talking about here is about streets and lighthouse maybe having such good loot compared to other maps. Like, why would you go anywhere other than streets? Like, what's the point of going to labs if you can just go to streets? I think, but I'm not sure. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Yeah.
Bosses being high risk, no reward.
Yeah,
which I mean, we kind of
just talked about.
Yeah,
in the sense.
PvP is at an all-time low, forcing everyone to hide away and camp extractions, which is kind of true as well. Like, and this is the thing. Like, some of these, I'm trying to take. I guess this is just me. My comment on that one. I'm trying to take some of these like output observations and bring them back into the game structure and say, how did we end up here? Like, is this actually valid for a start?
Right.
And like, if it is valid, if this is a valid outcome of the system that we've got based upon the emergent player behavior from the structure of the design, how is that the case? Why is that the case? And then how do we reverse it or subvert it or whatever to change it so that it's not the case? Marked rooms are in desperate need of buffs to incentivize running them, which is kind of what we talked about before about cases and the permanent upgrades being like Tarkov's like big thing. So I kind of agree there broadly. Content creation has never been worse because of these issues. I mean, yeah, whatever. Like, content creators, we can kind of shove it, but yeah, I guess it's sort of important. Also, please modify fan raid so it's only active for questing. The system you added is what hurt EFT the most in the past few years. Just don't allow players to sell ammo off players, and you won't break your game's balance with higher tier ammo. We should probably pause on that one for just a quick second. I don't want to linger too much, just to like get too into the weeds too fast. But like, I'm not sure about that one, because if you allow the armor back on the flea, to be sold from other players, or it depends exactly on how that is intended to. What that's intended to mean is that like any armor from players you can sell, is it still locked by? On the fleet, like you can't just like. I guess you can then like. Well, could you then flip it from the traders? I don't know. Are we talking about like player gear becomes fine in raid the moment you step into the raid, except for your friends? Like, if can tier 5 armors be bought from Ragman and then sold on the fleet to people at level 15? Like, this is the thing. These are sort of some of the like minutiae questions, but maybe we ignore that and we just talk about like specifically players in raid being able to sell the items from the players in raid itself. It's like, well, you're now allowing everybody who has level 15 to access some good armor.
Potentially, but most likely, because there's a lot of players. It's a global economy. So,
yeah, exactly. There's a lot of players. You're re-tagging. Like, we're gonna assume the least impactful change, which would be the system is exactly as it is now, except through some magical process, player gear gets re-tagged as fine in raid the moment that they enter the raid, except for the squad that they're with, where it's still non-fine in raid, right? So you can't just go in, kill your buddy, loot his stuff, and leave and then it'd be tagged, right? It's like that's the basic mitigation there.
Yeah, I mean
that then puts some of this high tier loot on the flea. It's still not accessible on traders. The trader loot is still not accessible on the flea. That's like that's like the minimum viable thing where it's like actually has an impact on the game, I feel. So it's like, okay, is it a good idea to have level 15 players be able to buy anything they like for cash? I personally think no. I think we've been there before. I think it completely negates the early game, and the early wipe post 12-12 has been better off for it. Does it mean that players are gate kept out of high tier armor and ammo, and they get destroyed by chads who get up to level 45 in the first week? Yeah, it does. It does. I'm sorry, it just does. Like you can't have everything. But the early wipe to me, like you should more be worried about like some people are going to do that, but like the average player will take a lot longer to get up to that high tier armor, and it makes the early wipe that much better, in my opinion. I just don't agree with putting this stuff back on, and it's not for any kind of like it's not even for like a who should get an advantage thing, because like arguably it's almost like, well, arguably it's better for the low tier players because everyone can access at level 15, but as we've seen from prior experience, low tier players tend not to buy this stuff, and all you end up with is the chads get to level 15 and they buy all the high tier gear. Because they're the ones who actually have the money because they can sustain their raids, so they have infinite gear. They bypass the trader, like the global limits. They bypass the per however many per hour per traded reset limits, etc., etc. It ends up becoming the Chad's playground because all you're doing is like the low tier player finally finds somebody, kills somebody with a headshot with Magnum Bark, and then they sell off the Gazelle on the flea because they're not going to run the Gazelle. They're going to carry on running the rat rig or whatever.
Why did they not run the Gazelle?
Because they won't. Because it's too high for them. Like they can sell it for 160k on the flea market to somebody who doesn't have level 3 Ragman, and they think, I could buy like 5 kits for that. It's always been like that, right? It's like people crafting like M61 to sell on the flea, like when you could still do that. So the low tier players have always done that because they don't want to use the high tier stuff because because of gear fear or because it's a sensible choice.
Yeah, but they're actively trading, like they're still getting the value of the item. It's just not in the actual thing it does. Like they're getting rubles for it, right? Like there's a trade happening, Like what I'm getting at is like I personally don't have a problem with like players trading. Like I think that's a really great thing. Because they're getting something and you're getting something, you know what I mean? And like unfortunately the way Tarkov works is it's because it is a global economy, it's like you don't really care about who gets the thing. Like that doesn't really cross your mind. You know what I mean? Like in Rust or DayZ or these more open world survival games, it's you tend to value, really think about, do I really want to like give this thing away that's like threat that could be used against me? You know what I mean? Whereas in Tarkov, you really don't have that in I don't think that's in a lot of players' conscience, in my opinion, because it's just sort of like I'll
aggregated, yeah.
That and I'll trade the temporary thing for a permanent thing, because in my opinion, you'll take the cash and you'll use that to upgrade something that's permanent, which I think is like honestly the correct play for most people. It makes sense. And I would say that the top tier players value this more because they are more confident in their ability to use a temporary thing to further their success with gaining rubles or whatever. So it's kind of like this weird symbiotic relationship. And it kind of makes me sad because when you do find something that's valuable to other players, I would like to, in some cases, sell it and get things that I'm currently after. In some cases I want to spend, I want to invest a lot of rubles into something. Like if I'm going to do this crazy run and try to kill Rashala on customs, and I want to, I've been grinding, all my cash up, and now I want to buy the slick, the Alton, whatever. You know what I mean? I enjoy that experience as well. The final thing I'll say is I think a part of the problem is where's the money coming from? And I think that because you can play Scav and all your loot's found in raid, and you're effectively, whereas you play in PMC, you have to risk something.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess not technically you can go in naked, but you're risking the fact that if you die with nothing in your container, you're gonna pay 19,000 rubles to therapists, whatever. You get like an extra tax for being a hatchling. But Scav, you don't have to risk anything. So you kind of just pump out, if you're successful, right? If you extract, you kind of just pump out free rubles at the cost of not risking anything, which I think is problematic, because then you sort of have like an inflation of, like, if you remove Scav and hypothetically just had the flea market, I think it would play maybe a bit differently in the market, because you don't have that sort of safety net barrier. You might value armors more, ammo more. You know what I mean?
Perhaps because you can't throw the kits away as easily because you can just like build it back through Scav, like maybe.
Yeah, and it's like you may be less likely to sell it because it's the value of it is increased because you don't have that safety net, perhaps.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, just a thought, but nonetheless, I personally don't have a problem with selling stuff, but where Tarkov is right now, and how things are shaping up, I don't know. I don't know if I really care anymore,
Yeah,
honestly.
it's just that thing of, do you want the players who find money easy to make being able to buy basically anything they want because the money doesn't matter? I just feel like we've seen that before, and I just feel like it ended badly. Like, yeah, I just feel like we've seen that before. Like, you know, and then I almost feel that if you have the ammo is still restricted, but you can buy the armor, that's almost worse.
Yeah, it almost makes armor super
Because
valuable,
now,
right?
because the armor's super valuable. Now though, see, people can't even kill you.
I should say the ammo's really valuable, but that's the thing is, like,
But it's both. It's like the ammo is really valuable,
but this
but
is
you can't buy it. But
this
then
is
it's like,
in my problem, like in my opinion, like the problem is the seller, not the buyer. Like, if you're complaining about Chad's wearing the armor, it's like, why are you selling the armors? You know what I mean? But then your thing is like, well, I'm gonna obviously sell it because I can do a permanent upgrade. And like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But like, you can't have it both ways, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's just like you're trading something. You know, there's a pro and a con. Like, you're giving away something, you're losing something at the same
but
time.
also like, but as an individual, right, you have no agency over that, because even if you decide not to and you're going to use it, like everyone else will sell it. Like, you're still negatively affected by just like the broad behavior of the player base. You know what I mean? And the only way that you fix that is by forcing people not to be able to do it. Like, I know what you're saying, right? You're saying like, as a collective, people are selling these things to the chads and then complaining. But it's like, even if you're just like, well, I don't want the chads using this stuff.
Even if you're
If you're
one
not
person
selling it to them, yeah, you're one person who's like not selling it to the chads. Everyone else still will be. It's like just the way that markets go, right? So you can't change as an individual. But like the group behavior, like, I get it. But some people might not even be like that. They're like, oh yeah, I'll let the chads use the stuff because I'm going to get more value out of it for me in the way that I play, doing my thing, because I can't really afford to run that kit. So that's just the way it is. It's just like, yeah, it's just really, it's a complicated thing, because it's also tied into the whole, like, who should have what availability of what when, and like, should level 1 players be able to kill level 50 players and all of that stuff. It's like the tipping point. And we talked a long time ago with oh gosh, what's his name? I can't even remember now. I can't remember his name, but it's the guy from Reddit, and he had that like breakdown. That's the one, Arxmaster.
Yeah,
and he had that breakdown of the different, like, you know, the eras of Tarkov, where it's like most in one-shot thorax, gear is useless and anybody can kill anybody because everyone just uses the most in. And then you have the Juggernaut era, where like no one can kill the top guys because none of the ammo can go through, nothing can kill them fast enough before they've killed you. It's like they're all just things. Like, which one is the right one? What's the right way
Mhm.
to go about it for the player base? Like, it's kind of tied into this too, because like
Yeah.
I'm
No, it is.
advocating for more restrictions, which actually makes it like it makes it harder in theory for the lower tier player, because it means that you're not able to buy good stuff even if you want to, which is kind of crappy, I will
Yeah.
admit. But as I said, like what we saw in practice was that lower tier players, on the whole, not always, but on the whole, were not buying the gear, and all you ended up with was the chads and the players with all the money. I mean, it would make sense, right? Because you have to have the money to buy this stuff. So the guys with all the money were buying all the good things, and then they were basically able to buy that from
So
level whatever.
effectively, it's the same result either way. The Chads still get the good stuff because they grind more and they're more successful. And the lower players are still using the bad stuff because they don't play as much. They're not as successful.
They're the same but different in a nuanced way, I feel, because in the one model, anybody has the ability to go and buy the stuff. Just one grouping of players decides not to, for economic reasons or whatever other reasons. In the other model, there are certain items that just cannot be bought, and so the chads then, everyone has an equal opportunity to find an alt-in a stash because it cannot be purchased. But if you revert the system the other way, then like alt-ins will then become finding raid-off players who are using them, and then they can be sold, and they'll probably be bought more by the chads, and then you have more people running alt-ins than you did before. So it's sort of the same. Like the chads will always have better gear, right? The chads always have better gear than the Timmies. That's a staple. That's just the way that Tarkov is always going to function. Because even if you made it completely hardcore and there were no traders, because the chads will just hit more stashes, or they'll just hit more loot containers, and they will have more things, and they will have better things for it, because you both get the same loot pool. And the chads probably even hitting a higher tier loot pool, and then you're getting like 10 rolls as a Chad versus 1 roll as a normal player. So you just have to use the best items you can out of that 1 roll, whereas the Chads get 10 rolls of the same thing, so they can use the 1% better item rather than 10% better item. So the Chads are always going to have better stuff, regardless, just because Tarkov's a time game, fundamentally. That's always going to be the case. But it's about like what's fair, what's good for progression, what's good for the game. I do feel like the restrictions have been good on the whole, because it's not, in the early days, it's actually not the Chads, like the real Chads. It's not the real Chads that dictate the early game. It's the average player base, the sort of average person, the broad block of players moving through the trader progression that dictates the feel of the early wipe. And when the average player could get to level 15 and then buy like, even like in your intermediate stuff without having the ragman levels for it, then you just saw loads more of that stuff early. You had like some people using really high end gear, some people using mid tier gear. It just kind of bypassed the whole thing. Whereas like post 12.12, it's been a lot better. It's been a lot better on the field, because people always complain about that. It's just like, oh, the wipe's done like 24 hours and everyone's running around with this looking Alton. It's just like we seem to have forgotten all of these old arguments that we used to make about like why this sucked before.
Well, I think part of the reason too is that there was an overabundance of high tier stuff. Like if something was extremely rare, like essentially how a rare item is or how valuable, I guess what it does for you. In other words, if Altons were like a 0.001% chance drop, they probably would sell for a crazy amount, maybe, I don't know, but that could be one way to approach it. Because I mean, previously you could kill Rashala Scars and get like at least 1 Alton, maybe 2. I don't know. Like it was pretty nutty back in the day. I remember. I mean, Altons were just like a dime a dozen. It felt like, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's like, I don't know. I was gonna make a joke like, oh, so you're a commie and you don't want a free market? Is that what it is? Like, I do agree. Like in some ways, the linear path is nice because it does make the early game feel like it's lasting longer. But the con with that is like I have to follow the linear path. Like day one, the wipe. Early on the wipe, it's like I'm not gonna see a wide range of diverse stuff typically. You know what I mean? It's just like you see a lot of the same things because everyone's on the same path. That was kind of one pro of the older system, was some early on you could run into a really juice guy and like you may or you may die, you may win, but if you do win, it's it's exciting. Like, oh my god, he's got a kill of us, I don't know. It's such a tough one. It all comes down with how BSG wanted to play out.
Exactly. Let's carry on. Let's try not to get too bogged down, because there's so much. I'm going to read some of my stuff in a minute, because I think there's oh god, but it's freaking just crazy, dude. There's everything's interlinked and it's just a mess, which is why I'm trying to at least start to make some sense of it. Okay, so the next part of Tiggs' one, at least we'll finish his. Cheaters are not controllable, so stop trying your hardest to shape your game around them. Kind of agree.
I agree.
This has only hurt your game and your audience. What I mean by this is you ban said cheater who buys a new account and then does it again, resulting in nothing. When the game is super hardcore, like it is now, encourages more shitty behavior. This is why we have so many hackers, because the fun is shaped around winning at all costs, and all it costs to win is a new account and cheats. Kind of. But one final thing, ever wonder why a majority of player base quits after max traders and kappa? Most of the time, that's because there's nothing else to do after these things. In the past, what made EFT great was the action, the PvP, the weekend labs. Everything felt active and over the top because PvP was rewarding and engaging. You ruined this part of the game, and that's why wipes die off even quicker than before. And yes and no. There's a lot there, but I mean, yes and no. People have played 8 wipes or whatever, and they get burnt out. Maybe it would have been the same even if they'd kept the patches the same way. Maybe not. Maybe people just enjoyed the PvP so much that it was self-sustaining. But I mean, the wipes used to die off before, even prior to patch 12.12. And people always used to say back then there was nothing to do, right? Kappa was too easy to get. So I think that's maybe rose-tinted a little.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll say about that is I think Tarkov really is its loop is PvP. That's all it really has to offer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's, I think it wants to be something else, but I think in reality, that's what it is. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, I do sort of agree about the cheaters thing. But, okay, so let me just let me just read through some of the stuff that I wrote down.
Okay.
So that we can, and then we'll stop when we get to something interesting, or we suddenly it sparks something interesting. So I basically just wrote down, what are the problems with Tarkov? Some facts. So I started off saying, obviously, biggest priorities is audio, networking, and AI, but that's not really what this is about. This is about game loop and balance and whatnot. So the most efficient way to progress in the game is to quest really hard until you hit level 42. Quests are the same every single wipe right now. That's kind of a problem, right? It is the most efficient way to progress in the game, is to just quest you see at max traders. Or at least level 40. You don't really need 42, but level 40 with mechanic is important.
And why is that efficient? Why is that efficient?
Because it's where you get the most EXP.
But why do you want EXP?
To get to, because traders are the only way to actually
do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of talk about that a little bit later. There's another section. Or maybe I should just jump to this.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to explore that and get to the root there.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, and that is a good point though, because I hadn't added that line. It's because XP dictates the trader levels. Takes the trader levels and questing gives the most XP.
Yeah, because you're also, while you're doing your quests, and you're also passively gaining XP through other things you normally would be getting XP through.
Exactly. So you could do a quest and kill 10 scavs rather than just go onto the map and kill 10 scavs on your own. You may as well go and quest. Some of the quests are annoying, but on balance, you'll end up with way more XP doing the quests than not doing them. And then you also get better gear because you need to do the quest to get trader rep as well. Yeah, plus trader rep, which is an actual requirement. You have to do the quest. You can't just get XP. You have to. Even you could be level 42, and if you have 0 trader rep, you got the standard account. You're going to have no traders past level 1. So except for Peacekeeper. So quest is the same every wipe, which is a big problem, right? That's all supposed to change. I don't know. It's a problem right now. The most efficient way to make money is to avoid PvP and loot 10k per slot items, filling your bag and selling it all on the flea. This is another fact.
Yeah.
And maybe
probably.
Scaving, right? But scaving the same thing. It's like looting 10k items. I didn't even say about PMC.
It's basically the same thing. Yeah, it probably is. The
only thing to that is the factory run through and then play PMC and fill you out a bag with 10 slot items,
Yeah, I just can't really imagine PvP and being profitable now. Maybe in the flea market days, but that's the thing is this is the thing back in those days. If you wanted to do that route, I think the way to do it was you get the most cost efficient kits, which was the Mosins, right? Mm-hmm. The VSS's Hunter and M61 Hunter,
Magnum
couple of
Bucky,
yeah.
shotties, and all that
But like
stuff.
it was so counterintuitive because like, what's the point of doing that? Like, yeah, you made a ton of money, but then you're gonna sell it all and do what? Buy another Mosin and go in, then what? It's basically just watching your rule count go out, which is
Yeah,
fine.
because
I
it's
mean,
like, do you want to use a
totally
meta kit? Exactly. You're basically saying like there's no advantage having the meta kit, really. Although I use I don't know. There's something to be said, isn't it? It's like you run a kit that costs 50k
Mhm.
and you beat Chads with it sometimes, and you have a 40% survival rate, but you win but you make way more money. Versus having a thick kit that costs 500k, where you have a 70% survival rate, but you actually do lose money overall. So you're kind of paying for the survival rate. So even though you survive more, it's not worth it. You die.
And arguably, the point
100%.
of getting money is to buy stuff to use in raid, which you're free to use whatever. But if you're constantly using, you know what I mean? It's just there's this weird conundrum where it's like for some people the satisfaction was like seeing the money go up, which is like there's nothing wrong with that, and then the other was like running the good stuff because it's, you know, this is supposed to make me stronger, but then the guy that's got a cheap kit is like, you know, competing with you. It's just kind of weird. Anyways.
Yeah, I've sort of like, I feel like I've come to peace with that myself. And it's like, you use the cheap kit and you can win with it, and you know, you don't really risk much, but you have a lot to gain. But your survival rate is lower. Like you're like paying for survival rate, right? And over a certain threshold, it's no longer profitable to run that kit. But your survival rate will be higher if you didn't, than if you weren't using it. But that's kind of what you're paying for. You're paying for the privilege not to die in some
that's
situations.
True. That makes sense.
But that's like how I square it. But yeah, I don't know. And then so I've said like we've sadly lost cool moments such as finding weapons case or super high risk reward challenges like bringing a thick case to labs because of RMT. Right, we already talked about that. ITA rooms locked behind rare and expensive keys need the ability to spawn these items, but this was turned off to try and counter ESP players who can see all the items across the map. And then I just put a little note in just saying like spawns in marked room items only when the room gets unlocked, question mark. You know, kind of what we were talking about containers, you know, only populate the room when the key gets used. Maybe not a random idea. Then the end game loop is either continue to grind tasks that are not fun to either achieve Kappa or Lightkeeper, which is Lightkeeper's maybe slightly better. Or PvP. Just for the sake of it.
Yeah. That's kind of my argument. Yeah.
That's the end game loop right now. Right?
I mean, I feel like the loop is PvP, and how do you participate in PvP? You do, you know, you acquire rubles, and then that's how do you acquire rubles? You loot stuff, take it out, you do quests, whatever, you build a hideout, outsell stuff. You know what I mean? That's kind of the loop in a vacuum, in my opinion. But
yeah, because I guess like the PvP is like you try to acquire rubles by going to the hotspots because you know other people are going there to try and make money, even though neither of you need the money. You all go there because that's where people go to get the money. So you end up fighting other people, and everyone's fighting over this loot that no one cares about because no one needs the money, but you all know that everyone else is going to be there because they're there because you're there.
And the whole conundrum is if money is not an issue anymore, then you're just like, it's tedious to participate in PvP because you have to buy all the stuff. And I guess it's more of a fault of the menus, but you have to like click all the buttons, you know, to go back in the raid and do PvP again. You know, it's kind of like,
yeah.
Whereas in the early game, when you don't have a lot of money, I felt like it's a lot more. PvP is a more polarizing, more exciting, you know, riskier. You know, you putting that kit together is a lot more meaningful. I like that experience a lot more.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of a dive off. So I said like, okay, weapons are one-dimensional in the end game, partly due to modding, partly due to recall, and partly due to breakpoints and ammo.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty accurate.
Shooting mechanics are now too random and inconsistent. Fragmentation, which has been working in a weird way that isn't understood for a while now, plus the ability for limbs to be hit multiple times by the same bullet, are reducing time to kills dramatically in specific cases, but not in others. I think this is a big issue. I genuinely, this has been plaguing the community for a while. I haven't done any tests. I've been away and I've not been, had the time to spend on it. But I want to look into it a bit more and figure out exactly like how bad the problem is, because this inconsistency in firefights is like a genuinely ruining the experience for some people, like in a big way, because sometimes your slick will take like 5 shots, no problem. And sometimes you die in 2 shots to your arm from some crappy round. And it's like, why? It's just really weird and inconsistent. It makes people like, again, it undermines the higher tier kits, and you just think like, what's the point?
Yeah, you definitely. It's like the opposite of back in the day where that arms used to
Absorb everything, yeah. It used to be like armor, right? So that rather than going through to the chest, your arm, even when it was, because when it was blacked,
it would stop.
It
the
would
bullet.
continue to, it would stop the bullet and continue to take the damage, and you'd then have the 0.7 multiplier across your whole body, rather than it hitting your thorax because the arm's in the way, and people used to use the canted like foregrip, so the arm was even more in the way. So then you basically forced your player to do leg meta through your arm to kill you. So it felt like people took an incredible amount of damage because, like, on legs are 1x and arms are 0.7x. So you took even less damage. Like, you know, we're going to do a very quick calculation. This isn't correct. 440 divided by 0.7 is 630. So PMC is like shooting them through the arm. I'm ignoring the fact that the first bit isn't 0.7 because you're doing 60 damage to start with, but I can't be bothered to do the proper calculation. It's something like 620 effective HP you have to remove. Like, you feel more like a boss guard or something, right? Forcing somebody to shoot you through the arm exclusively to kill you. Because arms is like the suckiest place to kill someone. It's got the lowest multiplier. And they're like right in the way of the thorax. So, yeah. So I don't know. That's that. And then I basically said here, this is something that we touched on before. Because obviously I'm thinking about it, right? So that's why I've touched on some of these points already. There are no cool ways to grind for rare and exciting equipment, such as 7 and 40, Altin and Reese T's, and Zhuk 6 armors.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky one because cool is subjective, right? Someone could be like, oh, it's cool that I do 1 million quests and do this hideout upgrade to finally craft it every 6 days, you know? That's cool.
Well, these ones I've picked in particular because there's no crafts, there's no barters, they're not on traders, they're only in raid, and they're basically only in stashes. So that's why I picked those 4 items in particular. 7M40, Altin Reese T, Zhuk 6. You could add like SSA AP, like all of the highest pen round for most calibers that like isn't even in. You can't even craft them. Zhuk 6 is just like never seen. It's just non-existent. Altin Reese T is just non-existent. You know, you get a couple from quests. You get like 2 or 3 Altins from quests, and that's it. That's all you have.
Yeah,
like that's kind of better in some ways, like, than never seeing it. Because you're like, oh, this is super rare, and like I'm using them only very rarely for doing specific things. I'm pairing them with Zabrala and just running around like a tank, but it doesn't feel great and have like no way of getting it other than just like pure RNG.
Well, you do have a way of getting it, but only a set amount, which ties back into I don't like how linear it's become, because it's like you're in like some weird, you know, deathmatch arena, and the more you play, or at certain point stages, you unlock a limited amount of new stuff, kits, you know. And it's like, oh, you used up your 3, sorry, you know, you're done for, you know what I mean? Like, it's just weird. I don't know.
Yeah. Bosses are not fun to play against most of the time because their lack of strategy is compensated for with higher aimbot and higher HP on both the bosses and their guards.
Say that again? Bosses or what?
Bosses are not fun to play against most of the time because their lack of strategy is compensated for with higher aimbot. I guess I should say stronger aimbot or something. Be a bit more precise in my wording. Stronger aimbot and higher HP on both the bosses and their guards.
Yeah, this is a difficult problem.
This one's tricky. And it's not always the case. Sometimes the bosses can be fun.
I think Tequila is the most interesting boss we have right now, because he can charge at you, but
he can. I've had some
very
uninteresting fights against him. Let's put it that way.
I think something's broken with him as of recent. There's a video on Airwing's channel where it's like Tequila's broken, and he's like aiming at the wall, but he's so close to the wall, his gun's turned sideways, and he's aiming at the wall. He's like on the stairs inside the factory office, you know, looking through the wall, and he's shooting, but because his gun's hitting the wall, he's shooting to the side, but he's like shooting at the wall. It's like, what is happening? Like, it makes no sense. And I've seen him like just healing in front of you. Like, it's just like a bunch of weird problems. But I mean, I feel like it's more of a technical issue, but there's a problem of, do you go the realism route? In which case, Sanitar, you could just like pop him in the head, you know, from any distance of almost any round. You know what I mean? Like if you just give them like the same HP as your character, then how do you make them difficult? It's like, well, we just crank up their aim bodiness, and it feels unfair. Like it's such a hard thing. I mean, I would like them to do more, Tagilla-y stuff, and then the other side of that, of course, is do you make them like what's the gamer word? Do you make them where they just like absorb damage, like they're tanks? You just gotta like bullet hose them down and that's like their difficulty. You know what I mean? Like if they're like a resource cost, but I
It feels
like
bad in Tarkov.
yeah.
In other
Well,
games
like
it's okay, but
well, like
in Tarkov it
imagine
feels bad.
if their AI was like god awful, but like they were just super tanky. Like that was the difficulty, right? You just had to have lots of ammo, lots of resources. That was like, that could work, but it wouldn't feel very realistic at all, obviously. So I don't know. I think like I've always thought like Sanitar, being like a healer, like basically the boss is his minions, but he heals them and buffs them. Like he just injects them with stim, you know what I mean? And then it like does something, something like this. It's a twist on a typical boss fight where it's like the boss is not the actual threat, it's his minions that he's buffing.
To have to try and kill him whilst taking fire from the minions or whatever.
Right.
Like,
but it's like, how do you do that in Tarkov? Because one bullet kills you. You know what I mean? It's just like it's such a it's a really difficult thing. So I don't envy you or them in that case.
Yeah. Like it's what I almost feel that AI aside and the locations aside, I feel that Killer is probably one of the better bosses in general.
Really?
I know that he's notorious at the moment, but I prefer that route of more armor and like even going down, you know what I mean? Like even going down the route of like unlootable armor.
I got you.
So Killer's got his like unlootable sledgehammer, but I'd rather them kind of play a bit more in the game world.
Right.
And have some stupid armor that you can't even buy. It's like some special thing. You can't even get it off him. Like it's kind of cool to be able to get armors off them and stuff. But like, Sanitar's got some, I don't even know, he's got some he's got like a titanium plate in his skull or some stupid thing. Like it's just, I feel that, just like bringing it closer to the normal PMC game mechanic would be better if possible. And that's why I kind of like Killer's sort of like that. I know he's got stupid head HP and stuff like that, but like at least he's wearing like,
no, I get you.
Class 6 and Class 5. And like, that feels a bit more reasonable rather than just having like a redonkulous amount of HP and no armor on. It's like, what?
Do you remember when they did the change where Killer would sometimes spawn with a lesser armor?
Yeah.
I kind of like that, honestly. I mean, it's not really relevant to what we're talking about here, at least not that much, but because like, in other words, like, yeah, you killed him. Like, yeah, he's easier to kill, but he doesn't have the armor, so he's like less valuable. You know what I mean? And then when he does have armor, he's like harder to kill, but it's like your rewards are greater. I kind of like that.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I genuinely didn't mind either. I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
Oh god, what next? Yeah, so they kind of just like random stuff now. So it's like takes 1,000 clicks to get into a game, which you said about loadout presets, so that should help. That should be fixed relatively soon, I think.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to match, which is again comes back to my like be able to use the stash and flee whilst loading. I really wish they'd do that. I know they'd probably have to change the whole game architecture to do that, but I still wish that would be good. Yeah, and then what did I say here? Yeah, so because this is actually kind of what we were talking about before with takes is like finding rate system missing for player gear deprioritizes PvP dramatically as it costs more to buy your own gear than you get for selling theirs. The issue is removing armor and ammo on the fleet. Kind of necessary to fix the early game. Oh yes, and then the way that I wanted it to be dealt with, it's like, okay, so what's actually the problem here? We're saying that PvP is unprofitable. That's the problem, right? It's like the loot that you get from the players, you could use it yourself, but if that was the case in all cases, then people wouldn't complain about PvP being unprofitable and being an issue. It's because you want to sell their stuff because you're not necessarily going to use their stuff, right? If they're wearing, I don't know, like a high-end class 4 or something that you're not going to use, you can't sell that to another player that it's valuable for. You have to just sell it to the traders at the trader amount. So it ends up not even being worth taking. And so people don't even bother taking this stuff.
Right.
You know, you want to use your own guns and use your own mods and whatever. So you just strip the one slot attachments that you'll probably use.
Yeah.
Maybe take one gun to put in your secondary. So I was like, okay, well, then if this is really the question isn't a monetary thing, really. It's about money. Why not just give the dog tags way more value and zero out if you're in the same team? You know, dog tags they're not worth anything if they're in the same team as you. But if you kill somebody else, their dog tag's worth like 10 times what it is now. Like make a player kill worth 200k. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, there's the only issue I would say there potentially is, you make farming low level players like you make killing players overall more valuable. So where if let's say that becomes the meta, right? Killing players that collect their dog tags is the way to make money, the new de facto way. I guarantee custom is going to be a war zone, dude. You know how many poor Timmies are just going to get abused and used just to strip them of their tags, man? Like,
you can keep the same system as now. Like Timmy's don't give that much money for their tags. Anyone under level 10 is like, even now it's like a few K at most.
I would say as a precaution, you make it, you widen the gap. You make high levels more valuable. You make low levels less valuable. It doesn't be like major on the low end side, like if a level 1 gives 1,000 rubles, maybe they give like 420. I don't know why I said 420.
Yeah, just it's like change the scale. Yeah, that makes sense. But like, so basically anybody who's like level 20 and higher or level 25 and higher should are giving like significantly more than they do now.
Yeah, something. I mean, I think there's something there because, yeah. I mean, I don't know. The problem is I feel like there's an assumption here, which is that PvP, like, I don't want to say needs to be profitable, but like PvP is like, there's a big emphasis on PvP, and it's like, is that core to Tarkov? Like, is that what Tarkov is about? Personally, I would tend to lean on the yes side because that's kind of the loop of the game, right? Unless you look at Tarkov as like a linear experience, which it also kind of is going for. It's like I've said many times, I feel like Tarkov has like a identity crisis going on. So depending on, and this is the interesting part too, is because we're going to get arena, and there's some type of in-game currency associated with it. What that looks like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be launch experience, but we might have that, fulfilled where it's like finally PvP is profitable. But again, it's like should PvP be profitable? That's the question. Is like every time I kill a player, do I have to make money? Why is it important that happens? It's important because there's nothing else to do. Okay, well, like maybe they need to address that. You know what I mean? They're like, I feel like the interesting part would be I need to do something to get resources so that I can survive. Which that's the weird part of Tarkov is like it's like a pseudo. It's like a survival. It is a survival game, but it's like survival light, I would say.
Yeah.
Like it has elements, but it doesn't really have. I've been playing a lot of Project Zomboid recently. Have you heard of that game or played it?
I've heard of it, but I've not played it.
Okay, it's a really cool game. I played it maybe two years ago. This all clean was playing it. He was talking about it. And I didn't really get into people playing it. Yeah, I didn't really get into it too much, but I was like, okay, this is kind of neat. It's basically isometric DayZ, and a very simple, oversimplification of it, and with RPG elements. Let me make that clear. You have RPG traits and skills you level up, and recipes you unlock, and things like this. But it's a lot of fun, and when you die, it's like you're like game over. Like there's just always tension, whereas like Tarkov, like there's a lot of tension in the early, and a lot of that I feel like it's driven, part of it is because of the you want to get the resources, but the other part of it is like it's like a race to the end. It feels like there's a bit of a FOMO going on, and once you reach the end, it's like you don't really have that same tension that you did about gathering resources, but the tension's way more into like winning the PvP fight,
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I feel that in some ways, I know people are complaining about the lack of the ability to craft the stuff in the hideout. Like, I'm a big hideout crafter for quests back in the day, but having to go out and get the items this wipe has been a huge focus of my kind of like mid to end game, and it's been a lot better for it, honestly. Like, having to go and find the items and learn the maps and get out with the items, find in raid, or at least just get out because I can't go into secure. You know, I've basically gone from MCC to GPSA to vertexes to like trying to find a LEDX as well along that route to finding the CFDM radios because I'm doing the Lightkeeper thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff I've had to just go and find. And it's like when you do find the item, you're just like, oh, I got to get out now. You know, it's like a bit like the early wipe because you can't just buy your way out of the quest. You can't just craft your way out of the quest now. Like, I got shot out with 762 BP exiting out of sewer manhole on reserve with like the final CFDM radio. And I'm just like, oh my God. You know, it's like, you makes you feel something again. So I think that kind of stuff, as much as I kind of I wasn't looking forward to it. And I feel that after doing a lot of it, it's made the game better for me, actually. Even though beforehand I kind of bristled and was just like, this sucks, you know? This sucks. I just want to play the game that I've been playing before. But when I like knuckled down and actually got into it and go, okay, fine, where do these things spawn? How are we gonna do this? How are we even gonna learn labs? You know, all of this stuff, like revisiting labs after I didn't really play it much the previous wipe. Like, it's been better. So yeah, I think that kind of thing does help, honestly, towards the end game. But like, yeah, that stuff disappears after a while. So once you're through, I mean, like, most people are already through all this stuff, right? It's just like it's taken me, I'm like more in line with the average player because of the amount of hours that I'm putting in after the first like month or so. And so for the end game guys, like, they've already done all this stuff. They've already got to the end of Lightkeeper. They've already got Kappa. I didn't even bother with Kappa this wipe. I'm just going for the Lightkeeper thing because it's different and interesting. And honestly, I found it more interesting. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, how do we continue to do that? Like, how do you continue to make items necessary and feel worthwhile? Or
you need to make survival relevant, always. And I feel the hesitancy of that comes from the restrictions, or not restrictions, but like the difficulty associated with that. Like, if, for example, if you made food extremely scarce, then you constantly had to worry about food. Like, inside raid, outside raid doesn't really matter. You know, people may not necessarily like that approach. You know what I mean? There's a bit of a hesitancy to it. But that's the interesting part, is like, you're like in Project Zomboid, for example, you're just constantly like managing different things. You know, it's like, I need food. Oh my God, I'm dehydrated. I need water. Oh my God, I'm in pain because, you know, a zombie hit me and I need to get meds. And now my character's depressed and I need to be leveling up electronics so I can, you know, craft this so I can do this. And I need to worry about the power going out, so I need to get a generator. There's just so many things you're constantly juggling. And even if you make it, you know, you do all those things, there's only so many resources. Like, you have to, like, eventually you're gonna die. You know, it's just like there's a nice renewable loop there, and I think that for Tarkov, a lot scarcity and like giving players the agency to do different things to help them progress that don't lead to dead end / completion. Like, when I complete the hideout, there's nothing there to do. It just always generates. Like, I want to be able to, like, I want my shit to break. You know what I mean? I want to be able to go repair my generator, you know, get new graphics cards because they're fried or whatever, you know, things like this. It gives you stuff to do, and it's like meaningful. It's like, oh, now I don't have the water buff of my water collector now, you know, because the pipes broke. Now I need to go find a pipe so I can get that buff again, which will help me to do this other thing. You know, it builds upon each other.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you look at these other games, and part of the way that the game loop works, like, you know, DayZ, I guess, is kind of similar. It's like you're always managing these various things and food and water and whatever, and trying to secure, you know, a constant store of this kind of stuff. And eventually you get yourself into a good position. And it sounds like in Project Zomboid as well, you experience these setbacks often enough that lengthens out the game, like, not artificially, but just by virtue of just how the game functions, right? You die and you have to start again and da-da-da. Whereas like Tarkov is like, as we've said before, the hideout is like almost like too consistent, right? You never go backwards, so you're just always building
Right.
on progression. Like, yeah, you can lose some gear and stuff, but like, yeah, your hideout never breaks once you've upgraded a module. It's just always there. Like, you have to put fuel in it, sure, but you can just buy that off the marketplace, and it's, you do a couple of the sensible crafts and you basically pay for it. It's just like it's hard to go like, as much as people are worried about gear fear and stuff like that. Like, it's actually very hard to go back to zero and down in EFT. Like, you have to have a really bad string of raids
Yeah.
running like high tier kits to lose a lot of money, and it happens. But it's not like you lose half your hideout or something because you make a mistake, right?
Yeah, I mean, the worst you could do is like sell something for and pay a ridiculous tax fee. But like you always, in my opinion, you always have this safety net of at least a secure container. I feel like Scav is it's really hard to lose your Scav perks, but it can happen. I mean, I feel for the new players who didn't know any better and lost karma.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
and as you said, as you progress, you just sort of hide out.
yeah,
It just gets bigger
yeah.
and bigger.
It's tricky. Yeah, so there was a whole like this sort of, as we go on, it was like harder for me
Right.
to fill it out because I'm still like, 'cause it's still a work in progress. But the next one, I was thinking about like finding raids specifically just as like a slice.
Mm-hmm.
About finding raid tags, bans, trader gating, like stuff like this. Because I do, as I said, I do really want to put together almost like a model of like, here's how the game's structured and like why this makes certain things the way that they are. So for this one, I basically said like, taking it right back to basics and thinking about Daisy, thinking about games like Project Zomboid, thinking about Diablo 2, thinking about just all of those types of games where you like go out and find stuff and then you have them in your inventory. And yeah, it's different because, well, I guess it's more like Daisy because like if you die, you lose your stuff, whatever, and you have some places to store it and whatnot. But anyway, the first line in this, which I think is like almost a fundamental thing that we've touched on before, but it's almost a first axiom of this whole like piece is loot pools in the actual game suck. It is extremely hard to find decent weapons, ammo, and armor in an actual raid.
Yeah. Specifically weapons and gear.
Yeah. The trader system is the only reasonable way to get decent equipment on a consistent basis, hence the requirement to quest in the first place.
Yeah. Which,
That's kind of the reason why.
maybe makes sense. Maybe that's how they want to be set up. You're supposed to do business with the traders. You're supposed to give them barter items. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess like we've talked before about like rebalancing the in-raid loot and having less stuff on the trader. Because I get this sort of I was like on a whole other tangent. As soon as I wrote that, I was imagining another world where the traders sell like a fraction of the items that they do right now, and then you have to find most of the stuff in raid. Like they'll sell you the basics and they'll sell you more stuff as you get rep with them, but it's like, yeah, basic stuff. They're not going to sell you every flavor of 5.56 weapon. They'll sell you basic ammo, but that's about it. So you've got a consistent but bad place to buy stuff, and you have to get all the other good stuff out in raid because that's the way every other game like this works. It's like it would just be weird if you're playing Diablo 2 and like all the stuff out in the raid is all common white items for the most part, and then you go back to the base and that's where you buy all of your stuff. Like even in the cycle, where it's like, I guess sort of similar, isn't it? Because you buy all your stuff in the traders there. So that's kind of a similar system to
Yeah,
Tarkov.
it's fairly similar, I would
But in
say.
most RPGs, it doesn't work that way. It's like you find the rare items with all of the extra, stats and mods and special magical properties and whatever. You find them on bosses and you kill. You just go and find them in loot spawns or whatever. And then the traders normally sell just like the absolute basics.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's just a product of instance-based gameplay. It's like you're taking pauses between what you typically would be one continuous flow of gameplay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of. That's sort of why I quite like analogizing it to Diablo 2 because that's sort of similar because you do a raid, so to speak, and then you do the bit of that section and then you town portal back to base and then you like sell your stuff and heal up and like repair your stuff and then you kind of go out to the next section. Now Diablo 2 sort of works that way because there's like each act is split up into sort of subsections and you kind of find the next waypoint. So once you find a waypoint, you can use that to teleport back to base for free. So you kind of like each sort of bit that you do, you kind of extend further and further. So each part is separate. So it's not like you do the same raid over and over, but I mean, you can if you want. If you want to do a particular piece, again, you can do. But that's why it feels sort of analogous because, yeah, there's like traders in the base on Diablo 2 and they sell crappy white items. So if you need something, just anything. Like you never. But again, like that system's almost broken the other way because you just never buy anything from the traders normally because it's useless. You go out and you find like something better almost instantaneously. So I don't know. Like maybe that's not the perfect thing. But anyway, continuing on. So with no limitations at all, higher tier players can resell from the traders back down to lower level players at level 15 or whatever the flea market threshold is at the time, and this negates the requirement for progression through the trader system to some extent. It means you don't get cheap stuff, I guess. It means that you can get some stuff, but it might be expensive. You can access it, but it might be more expensive than if you were on the traders. Because the old system, right, you used to be able to level up to Peacekeeper 4, buy M61, and then sell it straight back on the fleet to people. And you used to make tons of money. Selling BP on the fleet was really incredibly profitable. Yeah, that was super busted. So you could make a load of money if you were a high tier player. If you're a lower tier player or just didn't have the time, you could just buy anything you wanted.
You basically didn't have to participate in gameplay to get resources. It was so dumb. Well, you did. There was an X amount of hours you had to put in, and afterwards you could just sit in the menus and generate infinite.
Yeah,
money.
It's one of those funny things that now when it's just kind of like, back then you had no final raid, nothing like that. You got rewarded for leveling up the traders because if that item was really niche or rare and wasn't on the flea, then obviously you could buy it from the traders. That's fine. And normally it was cheaper from the traders because why would anybody sell it cheaper than the traders unless they're looting it in raids? Like most of these things were more expensive, so you'd buy BP from the trader and flip it on the flea. Like looking back at it now, like is that inherently a bad system? You get an advantage for leveling up by being able to buy it for free. I'm trying to question everything here. I really am.
Fair enough.
Once you get to level 15, it's like, okay, well, you can buy anything, but it's at a premium. Is that necessarily so terrible? We've been through so many iterations of this stuff that sometimes the initial thing that was in place may not look so bad anymore.
I just feel like it disproportionately favored players who could sink in a bunch of time early on in the wipe.
Does it not now? You can't even buy class 5 now until you get to level 3 Ragman. It's not even possible. Well, Prapple 3, if you want to split hairs, but can't even buy that stuff.
Sure, but they have to actually participate in gameplay. It's the difference, though. Now, whereas before,
the trader levels, you mean?
No, to get the item, right?
Yes.
Like now,
you have to get to a certain level to actually buy this stuff.
Yes, but we're like the problem. In my opinion, the problem prior was that you could just generate resources, an insane amount, at the cost of grinding really fast, really early on. And
from other players, in fairness,
the
money's coming from somewhere. Like another player's playing you for the value that you provide for being early.
Other players are what? Playing for you?
The other players are paying you for the value that you bring to them for being early, to allow them to access higher tier stuff outside of their trader levels through your trader level.
Right.
So it's still just a transfer of money from one player to another.
Sure.
I'm kind of playing devil's advocate was super hard because I want to nail down like why this is bad.
Well, I mean, versus now, everyone has to compete to get it, right? Like there is no, I can't. What are we talking about specifically? Because I may not.
We're talking.
I may not be up to date on all the changes. like a TV 110 rig.
Let's do an
HK barrel. Because I remember selling those. The HK.
I would even just think about the ammo again, just like 7.62 BP or whatever.
Sure. Whereas now, previously I could just buy it and flip it. Whereas now, everyone has to grind it to get it. There is no trading, right?
Yeah.
So it still benefits the people who can grind earlier and faster and more often.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not able to generate resources from it. They're paying they're still paying the cost, you know what I mean? Like they're getting the item, but they're not able to like make it exponentially grow. Do you know what I mean? Like it's when you think about it, it's kind of insane because you could Like you could literally take 4,000 rubles and turn it into like 2 million rubles. I mean, that's probably an over exaggeration. Whereas now I can't buy the BP and turn it into anything more risk free, because you could do that risk free once you've done the prerequisite. That was the broken part to me, was you could just literally sit in the stash and just generate money. It was so busted. The other argument I would make is like, why is a trader so like the dynamic trader argument? It's like, in theory, I don't really have a problem with someone flipping it as long as a trader's like smart to recognize, oh, this is actually priced incorrectly. I need to increase my prices. There's a lot of people buying this. I need to get more stock on my next resupply. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things you could do there, but that's, it makes things more complicated, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about how now you have to. Yeah, you can't just like generate money for free in the hideout.
Risk-free.
You can't just monetize your trader level risk free.
Yeah,
you can use the items yourself, but you can't sell them to other people, and you can't just generate money out of nowhere from that. Well, not out of nowhere from somebody else, but just for risk free money. Because risk free money is a problem, I suppose. Well, I guess the hideout does that though.
It does, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Like you're,
it's more under control. You have to invest in it monetarily as well first.
There's a lot to invest in there. It's like trickled out. You know what I mean? Like this, as soon as you hit the requirement, dude, you could start flipping barrels. It was so, and you had to do the refresh thing because they sold out so fast. It was a wild time.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That kind of like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Because like the first thing that really came in, and this is kind of what I was saying next, the finding rate limitations were intended to combat hatchlings and prevent secure container resales of high value items like GPU and LEDX. However, this also directly nerfs PvP with the inability to resell gear items that you obtain in combat with other players. This is where it first came. This is how it first became a thing.
Yeah, I mean, as I understood it, the main reason was, as you said, hatchlings, because you would go into resort, loot a LEDX, and literally disconnect, like put in your container, literally disconnect and turn it in for the quest or sell it. And that was a problem. So they came up with Found in Raid, perhaps, inspired by or, through Veritas, which Veritas is a slightly different system that they, kind of didn't implement fully, which I thought was a better system where you a much more in-depth system at the very least, where, you tag things, sort of like what is the source of this item, etc. But anyways, yeah, I forgot where I was going.
Yeah, because the what I was saying there is kind of you got these like multiple aspects to like the limitations on the marketplace, right? So you've got like finding raid as a thing in and of itself, which is the anti-hatchling thing, but then also had an implication for PMC gear that you brought in, because that was non-finding raids. Now you cannot sell PMC gear on the flea.
Yeah.
But then you've got flea market bans themselves,
right?
Which is a separate thing, which prevents the flipping of these items from the traders that are deemed high tier, including all class 5 armors and above, and most high pen bullets.
Well, you can't really flip them from the traders.
Well, you could before. I guess in theory, it depended what it was.
Pre-found in raid. Yeah.
Yeah, pre-found in raid, yeah. So these two things kind of come together.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So it's now like, even if you find the item in raid, you can no longer sell it on the flea, even if you found BP or whatever. That can now no longer go on the flea market as well.
Right.
I basically I just come to the conclusion that like the trader progression system is probably the issue, is they sell too much stuff and they warp players' priorities towards the quests almost exclusively.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like what BSG wants to do is they want to have like this in-depth story thing where you do the quests, you do unlock the traders, it's sort of like a collective linear experience in a multiplayer setting. And once you're at the end of that road, that's that's the game. On the flip side, there's this whole other sub game with the risk reward economy, getting resources, risking them to do an objective, right? Because we kind of have that with, you know, things like upgrading the hideout. It's like, right, why do I want to upgrade the hideout? Well, because it will do this for you, which will make you better, you know, X, Y, Z. You know, you'll have more resources, or there's some minor stuff which I wish they would do more of, but like you know, you get like more hydration, I think, or is it energy? I can't remember.
Yeah, energy.
Like those things
And
heal
there's some tips and
faster.
skill stuff too now as well.
That's true. That's true. Like I kind of wish more of that was at play, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of about those permanent upgrades. But yeah, that's basically it. And then I just said like something I already spoke about, which was the extraction shooters. The issue is items being lost on death. They do prioritize the value of any particular item, even the really good ones, because one bad raid and it's gone. Which kind of like, yeah, it negates, like, it makes one of the elements that allows an end game loop where you're just trying to complete like the perfect kit, and you're like you've got an item and it rolls a stat on strength between 10 and 20, and you've got the one that's 16 and you're trying to grind for the one that's, you know, in the 17 to 20 range. Like, that just doesn't exist in EFT it just can't, because those upgrades are permanent on your RPG character, but they're not permanent in Tarkov. And so those things just don't make sense unless they're for the hideout. Like, you can't really have anything that's part of your character be included in that system. Like the end game loop for Tarkov is get more thick cases and store more stuff.
Yeah.
And
it
increase
really
your
is.
stash value and
Right.
do more PvP. That's it. There's not really any way around that, I don't think, based upon that you die and you lose everything.
No, because all the stuff you bring in the raid, you know, 90% of it is consumables, right? Like the gear, it can get consumed. The ammo, the gun can break and wear down. The armor can be, you know, worn down. And I guess that's how it ties in. It's like I feel like that's the goal. Is like you're supposed to invest in these consumables to do the quest to complete the storyline. I think that's the vision for the game. If I had to, you know, rub my crystal ball.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I mean, yeah, like you can think of some things, like we've talked about prestige before. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but there's like prestige. You could expand. Like they actually said they're going to expand the hideout more. I don't know exactly what that means, but hopefully there's more stuff. I don't know. I still feel like I'd rather the game go like the route of like more hardcore and take longer to get some of this stuff through. It'd be kind of neat, but
well, one thing to consider that might affect it is, you know, dare I say it, open world Tarkov. Okay, the maps. What map was I on? Was I on Lighthouse? Yeah, I was on Lighthouse. I was flying around in my Tarkov SP camera mode, and I noticed they had like reserve mapped out, shoreline mapped out, like like a lot, like there wasn't a lot of assets there, but there was a lot of like foundation, like the foundation was there. Like they had half of shoreline, like basically where the path to shoreline.
Yeah, because you can see it, so you kind of need it there.
Yeah, and then all the way up to the resort, all of that down to the river, to the shore. I would imagine. Maybe it cuts off a certain point, but they basically had like half the side of the map where the dam is. You know, the river down the middle.
Yeah.
But anyways, if they do open world, you know, that could change a lot. If they don't do that, at the very least, traders in raid could change a lot. You know, like now it could be very exciting to you may have more options to progress. You know, players are bringing in gear to then, you know, sell items, buy items, taking out. So now, you know, you can also participate in that as a low level player potentially, or whatever. You know, could be another way instead of having to go down the linear path. That could be another route.
Yeah, it's complicated. And this is the thing where I still haven't come to any like solid conclusion. I think there's so much to talk about, and it's what the best thing is going to depend on your own opinion and stuff. But like, there's still so much to it that I'm like trying to like map out. And there's a whole other section. I'm not going to go into this yet, but there's kind of what we talked about before, which is about top players want to increase the skill cap and increase the difference between players of similar but different skill levels. Like low level players want the ability to kill anybody, but you know, they have to accept they have a downside. We've got like the whole leg meta thing, and like that's like a whole nother thing that I'm not even going to go into now because we kind of run out of time. But there's so many like interlocking pieces to this, and like how to balance it, how to make it good, and then how to allow people to play for, like 3,000 hours on one account without getting bored in even potentially even in one wipe. Like, there's ways of doing it. I know there are. There's ways of doing it. So I'm just kind of intrigued because VSG seem to be sort of a bit like open to feedback at the moment. So I feel like strike while the iron's hot, try and get some extra stuff. So we brought up some good points there. I'm gonna hopefully put a bit more together, and then at least I need to structure it a bit, and then maybe release it out to people on the stream, people on Discord, whatever, so people can give me some like feedback, critique, whatever, and then maybe we can put together like the community's thing, or at least get some difference of opinion in there, and then potentially some good solutions that actually cover all the bases and aren't just, oh, you just need to do this to fix this, and then it's like, oh, what about that? And then you always end up in this, you pull one string in the web and then everyone ends up talking about all different parts of it, and then it's just like no one knows whether it's actually a good idea or not in the end because it's just a mess. So we need to bring this all down to the first principles and try to figure out what's going to happen if you do whatever change. Not an easy task, I will say, but I kind of hope it'll also just help us increase our understanding of the game and like how it links together as well while we go through it, even if it doesn't come out with anything particularly special.
Yeah, at the very least, it's an interesting thing to explore, and it may not actually come to anything, which is totally fine. I feel like we're tapping into the game design aspects of things, and I think that's really interesting as a whole. But at the very least, it could be inspiration for someone else and whatnot. I feel like some of the videos Veritas put out about this stuff have just kind of like burned him out, perhaps, on like doing this stuff more, because like especially the found and raid thing. I mean, he had a really intricate system I really liked with the tagging, but it just kind of seemed like that didn't. Maybe it fell on deaf ears. I'm not sure, or they only tried a half measure. But anyways, one thing I was mentioning, some content for Tarkov, and I've been talking with Abney Dude and Shudaville about doing some type of content piece the next wipe, because I was initially talking about doing an open world thing, but doing it with a group, and then tossed around some other ideas. But now I'm kind of like fully on the open world idea, because I just think it's like we had coming with the labs card. Like, what if we went to labs, early on the wipe and got like super juiced, and that was like the video, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, fuck, logistically, how are we gonna do that in like a reasonable amount of time? You know what I mean? Like, how is that even gonna be possible? It's just not. We're better off grinding to max therapist and doing it that way. So anyways, I think it could be interesting to do like a video on, what Tarkov, but it's open world, Tarkov, but it's 1.0, what 1.0 would look like, just some kind of like fun, just to see how it would play out if you had to like, go from travel to map, bring the gear with you as you looted, turn in the task and things like this. I'm thinking like doing like a couple of beginner tasks and call it a day there.
Be an interesting experience to see. I do like all these hardcore challenges because I think they are more fun in general, but it's yet another aspect of the problem, which is the gap between the veteran player and the beginner, and if you make the game too hardcore, then it's impossible to get started. Whereas if once you've got full wipes under your belt, and you kind of want to make the game harder for yourself because it's relatively easy once you know the loop. Yeah, it's an interesting one. That's why these hardcore accounts are kind of cool, and why I still stick to my guns. The fact that I think that a hardcore character would be a good one, but I don't know. I doubt we're ever going to see that, which I think is a shame, but is what it is.
It is what it is. All right.
Cool.
Well, how you feeling now? Flesh some of that out. Feeling better? Feeling okay? Neutral? More confused?
Good. I I feel like I want to carry on.
Cool.
I want to carry on. Like this, after a while, I'm like, I'm like sitting there just looking at like 40 statements. I'm like, man, what does it even mean? Am I even going to be able to? But yeah, I think it's good to just like go through and just talk through it and be like, okay, this is the stuff that's important. This is what's not important. And even just conceptually, it's like trying to link the facts to the concepts of saying, why do things feel a certain way? And say, okay, well, here's how the facts get to you to that level. And whether even some of these are necessarily true, right? Because like I do make some assumptions already.
Oh yeah,
So we just got to try and like break these down, you know, and say, okay, well, why is that the case? It's important to question right back to the start.
Yeah.
Like with the flipping of ammo, it's like, is this important? We're like, why is this bad? Why is this system bad? Why do we change? Like, because we didn't change it because that in particular was bad. We changed it because hatchlings were taking Lennoxes out of shoreline. Like, that's the thing. So it's like, maybe it wasn't bad. Maybe we need to revisit it. But it's just like, okay, no, there's an issue there because of the free. You should never really be getting something for free, particularly, especially not in a super easy way where you don't have to invest any resources other than just playing the game. So yeah, no, it's useful. Been useful.
Yeah, I appreciated the hard press challenge on that one. That was good.
We got somewhere.
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thanks to everyone, as always, for tuning in. And we see you all next week.
Catch you later.